I thought, since Venerable Simke is going to Taiwan, I would give a little bit of instruction about how to respond to some questions and fill you in on some things that you may encounter. And the others can listen as well, because one day you'll be going there for your ordinations as well. So one thing is that in the Chinese tradition is a Mahayana tradition, and the Tibetan Buddhism is also a Mahayana tradition. Sometimes people say Tibetan Buddhism is Vajrayana, and actually in the Tibetan tradition we don't say it like that. We say that we encompass all the teachings. So we practice the fundamental vehicle, the Theravada teachings in the Pali Canon. We practice the general Mahayana, and then Vajrayana or Tantrayana is a sub-branch of Mahayana. It's a type of Mahayana tradition. So it's important to know that when you're speaking to other people who are Buddhists. Even within the States, in the West, that people have a lot of confusion about this. And so one practices Vajrayana on the basis of practicing the general teachings of the fundamental vehicle and on the basis of the general Mahayana teachings. So one doesn't just go into Vajrayana and it isn't a separate kind of thing, divorced from everything else. And I say this because Vajrayana is prominent, in the Tibetan community, and it didn't spread so much to the other traditions. Some of it was in China for a while. There is a Vajrayana tradition in Japan called Shingon, but they aren't popular, like Vajrayana became in Tibet. And so there's a lot of misconceptions about Vajrayana that you encounter that are centuries old, and people will ask you about. And just as the Tibetans have misconceptions about the Theravada and the Chinese, the Theravada and Chinese have misconceptions about the Tibetans and about each other. So, it's just good to be aware of these kinds of things. Also because recently in Taiwan, I heard when I was there in the spring, that they've clamped down on giving visas to some of the Tibetans because they were having a big problem, I think, with some monks coming and, in the name of teaching the Dharma, maybe doing some things which weren't so kosher. So unfortunately, when a small number of people do that, then word gets around, and then everybody gets looked at in that way, which is really unfortunate. Yeah, and so we have to explain that, in our tradition we keep Vinaya very well, and and so on and so forth. One thing that is confusing for the people in the Chinese tradition, and also in the West, is that some of the masters in the Tibetan tradition are lay people. This is acceptable. You can be a lay person and still teach the Dharma. And in the Chinese tradition, most of the teachers, by far the largest majority of the teachers, are monastics. Very, very few lay. But in the Tibetan, you have some very prominent lay teachers, in the Nyingma tradition, in the Sakya tradition, and these are very well-respected teachers, Tibetans. And so what's confusing is that sometimes the lay teachers will wear clothes that look like monastic robes. Yeah, not all of them do. Some of them do, and His Holiness has advised them not to do that, but they don't always follow His Holiness's advice. Everybody thinks His Holiness is like a pope, and everybody follows everything he says, and that's not the case. People there say yes, yes, and then do what they want sometimes. So, and also, some of the lay teachers, they may wear a garment that is like a lower robe. It's maroon, like a maroon skirt. It doesn't have the patches and the stitching like the monastic robes. But if you're not Tibetan and you don't know how to look at the details of the monastic robe, it looks, because it's maroon, like a monastic robe. And then they wonder, well, why does that person have long hair? Why do they have a family and a wife? You know, why are they drinking? These kinds of questions may come. So you just have to say that this is just something. They're lay teachers, you know, they're known as lay teachers. This is an unfortunate confusion due to wearing, you know, the clothes, garments that look like the robes that His Holiness has asked them not to, but not everybody accords with that. Okay, and so just to explain that, and to explain that in the Tibetan tradition, monastics are celibate. If they aren't celibate and they keep wearing the robes, they actually should not be in robes. They need to be evicted from the Sangha. Okay? So, you know, sometimes you might have somebody who's unscrupulous who acts like this. You know, this happens in all the traditions, actually. Yeah. So you just need to be able to clarify that with people because they don't know anything about the tradition. Okay.